Now we'll look at acupuncture, another popular alternative practice. Acupuncture is the placement of needles to block pain and to bring about healing. Acupuncture believes that there are pathways in the body that facilitate the flow of energy called qi. A disharmonious flow of this qi causes physiological and psychological ailments. Acupuncture is based on the concepts of yin and yang, which are the two opposite forces of the qi energy. If the yin and yang are out of balance, ill health results, and they have to be brought back into balance through various techniques. On the left, we're looking at an ear. There's now something called ear acupuncture because someone looked at an ear and imagined that they saw a fetus in the ear. That led to the development of ear acupuncture, where different parts of the ear correspond to points in the human body, and that's where needles may be placed. The thing is, when someone says they're going for acupuncture, I have to wonder what they mean. There are a lot of different types of acupuncture. There's the kind with skin penetration, and there's the kind without skin penetration. So a lot of things count as acupuncture. Here's a list of things that acupuncture claims to work for. You don't have to read it. What I want you to look at is that these are the two, maybe 2.5, for which there may be some evidence: pain and post-operative nausea and vomiting. What I hear a lot about acupuncture is it's been around for thousands of years. This is referred to as the appeal to antiquity, which basically says, historically, X has been used or it's a tradition. Therefore, X must be correct because it's the way things have always been done. The thing about this appeal to antiquity, well, bloodletting was around for a long time. Binding women's feet was around for a long time. And astrology is still around. Dr. Hall talks about this in her video. Maybe acupuncture isn't so ancient. In 90 BC, there's literature that refers to bloodletting and lancing of abscesses with large needles made from stone and bone. I've always wondered how long these thin needles have been around. Early diagrams showed the use of blood vessels, not meridians. Before the 19th century, needles were inserted in points of pain, and the term meridian wasn't really used until the early 1930s. Ear acupuncture came around in the 19th, so maybe acupuncture isn't so old. Acupuncture research shows that it doesn't matter where you put the needles. It doesn't matter whether you use needles or pretend to use needles, what are called sham acupuncture needles. All that matters is whether the patient believes in acupuncture and believes he got the real thing. This is where the relationship with the provider is so important. A sham acupuncture needle, sorry for the missing letters in this diagram, the acupuncture needle goes into the skin. The placebo basically retracts. This is how you use a placebo needle. A lot of times what I hear from folks who use these alternative practices is, what's the harm? Even if it is a placebo effect, how is that hurting me? I feel better. I want to show you the results of a study. It was funded by the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, one of the branches of the National Institutes of Health, and the results were published in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is a high-impact peer-reviewed journal. In this study, they write, we compared the effects of a bronchodilator, 2 placebo interventions, and no intervention on the outcomes in patients with asthma. In a double-blind crossover pilot study, we randomly assigned 46 patients with asthma to the active treatment with an albuterol inhaler, a placebo inhaler, sham acupuncture. Remember, these are the folks at the National Institute of Complementary and Alternative Medicine acknowledging that sham acupuncture is as effective as what they refer to as real acupuncture, or no intervention. They measured an objective outcome, the maximum forced expiratory volume, the FEV1. For those of you with asthma, you can recall, do any of you recall breathing into that thing where you breathe out, breathe out, breathe out, breathe out until you can barely breathe? I know about it because I also have asthma, and that's called your FEV1. And they also measured a subjective, how the patients felt after treatment. So what's the harm? If we look at subjective improvement after each of the 4 interventions, it looks like everybody but the no intervention control felt improvement. The albuterol group felt better, the placebo inhaler group felt better, and the sham acupuncture group felt better. This is statistically significant. Now let's look at the objective outcome. What's the difference, folks? In the objective results, only the active treatment, only the albuterol, showed any results. The folks on placebo, sham acupuncture, or no intervention objectively had no improvement after their treatment. Let me show you that again. Subjective, objective. Subjective, objective. I have to tell you, folks, this study really scares me. A person may be experiencing an asthma episode. They don't want to take medication for it. They'll have an acupuncture treatment and think they're feeling better while their lungs and their bronchioles are becoming constricted because they don't have the proper medication to improve their health. That's the harm. The conclusions of the study: although albuterol, but not the 2 placebo interventions, improved FEV1 in these patients with asthma, albuterol provided no incremental relief with respect to self-reported outcomes. Quote, placebo effects can be clinically meaningful and rival the effects of active medication in patients with asthma, end quote. I have to tell you, I am holding on to my head as I'm reading this out loud because they're making it sound like the subjective outcomes are just as important as the objective outcome. But they do include, from a clinical management and research design perspective, patient self-reports can be unreliable. Please, if you have asthma and you are having an asthma episode, take your medication. And what is chiropractics? Well, it was a practice that was developed by a gentleman named D.D. Palmer on September 18th, 1895. It's not a science. He's not a scientist. As a matter of fact, Daniel David Palmer was an alchemist and a magnetic healer. And chiropractics arose from a single anecdote about a gentleman whose deafness was healed by a chiropractic adjustment. Palmer thought that a bone was out of place in a deaf janitor's back. He adjusted this bone, supposedly, and reported that the janitor was no longer deaf. The thing is that the janitor's daughter said her father was deaf until he died, and no one else has ever been cured of deafness by chiropractic adjustments. And the other thing is that the nerves to the ear are all in the skull. They have no connection to the spine, so any adjustment to the spine shouldn't have any effect on what's going on with the ear. Chiropractics explains all diseases through what they call vertebral subluxations. This idea has never been tested. Again, like with homeopathy, let's think about the state of medicine at the time that D.D. Palmer started practicing. Conventional medicine or conventional medical treatment was just as likely to harm as it was to heal. Germ theory was not widely accepted. The first antibiotic was not discovered for another 50 years. And in 1895, X-rays were discovered and weren't widely in use. So there really wasn't any way to ever verify that any bones were out of place. And remember, it's the bones that were being adjusted as part of chiropractics. After D.D. Palmer, his son Bartlett continued the practice, and this person was totally opposed to vaccinations and rejected germ theory even as it came into wider acceptance. There are 3 parts to chiropractic theory. One is subluxation, which refers to, in this case, the displacement of bones in the spine, and that this displacement is the root cause of all disease. Keep in mind the different practices that we've talked about in this topic and what the different root causes are. For example, acupuncture believes that an imbalance in the yin and yang and influence the flow of energy along these meridians in the body. In chiropractics, it's the displacement of bones that are the root of cause of all diseases. Also, the theory states that all body functions are governed by nerves from the spine, and that subluxations impair nerve function. Finally, that there is this mystic, vitalistic force that restores health through nerves when the spine is properly aligned. And vitalism is the belief that all living beings have this invisible life force that's not found in inanimate objects. It's this innate vital force, not like the innate immune response that we've talked about, rather an innate, invisible, vital force that gets restored when the spine is properly aligned.